Ayanokoji vs Nagumo, from a promising proxy battle to the confirmation which was not meant to be, to something with an unsatisfying but realistic end which allowed Kiyotaka to learn from it. Throughout Classroom Lead's progression, we have seen Ayanokoji Kiyotaka deal with various challenges in his path, which had ignited from the circumstances forced upon him by his past, which he had to act upon, or consequences from his actions in the grand scheme of things. One of these challenges was Nagumo Miyabi, who by the time the seeds of their conflict were placed, was the vice president of Advanced Nurturing High School's student council, and a person threatening the entire school with his domination. Unlike other cases where Kiyotaka had little to no options in picking fights with, such as in the case of Sakiyanagi, Ryuuen, or the White Room Enforcers. With Nagumo, it was a premeditated choice done for securing leverage and allies in the form of Manabu Horikita, who was in a primary stage of conflict with Nagumo at the time. If you're enjoying this video so far, please subscribe. Thank you. The conflict between him and Kiyotaka is additionally unique because it expanded through an extended period of time, in different forms depending on what level of a threat each of them saw in the other. It ranged from indirect warfare and trap-inducing to test the possible threat to their interest, to acknowledging the adversary and agreeing to a formal competition. The conflict between Kiyotaka and Nagumo began on the backbone of an already developed battle between Manabu Horikita and Nagumo, eventually blooming into something more. Miyabi Nagumo is a very gifted individual, having always been better at everything than everyone around him with little to no effort, having the ability to learn much better than others, despite never putting in particular effort and time, and being absurdly charismatic, naturally gathering big circles of individuals around him for all possible reasons. He has always been someone who had always excelled at everything he had been doing, without coming across any particular challenge in his way. Despite being the superior individual compared to anyone he had ever come across in his life, Nagumo had doubts about his ability being the genuine thing, wondering if it had been only the unfortunate circumstance of never facing a true challenge up until that point. This had made him develop a thirst for competition, and being able to prevail against the most able opponents he deems worthy of it against him. The ideology he embraced focused on true meritocracy for the individual self, rewarding the abled ones with power and punishing the weak for their incompetence. While he cunningly used this as a means to exploit masses of people and monopolize a large part of the student body under his thumb, Nagumo stayed true to this and used idealisms as a motivator for his battles against the ones matching him. In his stay at Advanced Nurturing High School, Nagumo was able to encounter two of these rivals, being Manabu Horikita and Ayanokoji Kiyotaka. Ayanokoji Kiyotaka, the White Room masterpiece, is a person with a tragic past caused by his own superiority and the environment he was forced to live in. His entire life before entering high school was spent enhancing his abnormally powerful abilities for the sake of being used for others' success. The White Room Kiyotaka grew in rewards the ones with the abilities on par with the minimal standard with their own survival in the curriculum, as what is not good enough is thrown aside, as if all the years they spent on working every day to be good enough was for nothing, without it being their own fault. Kiyotaka had grown to distaste everything the White Room stood for and aimed to achieve, and despite this being centered at his own success. The only survivor of the hardest generation in the research facility was him, as he was given a chance to be away from it all in the form of enrolling at Advanced Nurturing High School, Japan's brightest and elite. Kiyotaka's greatest aspiration was to prove the White Room wrong, and he plans to do this by being properly defeated. In the mentality of Nagumo and Ayanokoji lie some interesting parallels, both having always achieved superior results compared to the others around them, and have come to base their goals and motivations around their own abilities. However, they have very different aims to achieve. While Nagumo is in doubt of his own power due to his overwhelming status and not having to face any challenge, waiting to properly estimate himself by proving he's the real deal even in the face of a big challenge, Ayanokoji is, and has always been certain of his abilities. While Nagumo aims to prove his victory to be free of uncertainties bothering him, Kiyotaka wants to prove his defeat to be free from living a life he never wanted. This premise is what has drawn these two characters closer to one another. The first factor that made the encounter between Kiyotaka and Nagumo possible was Kiyotaka deciding to reveal his abilities more in the open and acknowledging the attention he might receive because of it, and for the sake of the benefit of having Manabu Horikita as an ally. In the sports festival in Year 1 Volume 5, Ayanokoji decides to use the opportunity to race Manabu Horikita to achieve a multitude of things in relation to his own plans, at the time involving Horikita and Ryuuen, as well as Manabu himself. This attracted attention from Manabu's rival, Nagumo, who began to look into the background of the inconspicuous student from Class D. At this point, Nagumo, who has just climbed to power and became president of the student council, began scheming a grand plan to deal with Manabu Horikita in accordance with his desires. Kiyotaka emerged from out of nowhere as an acquaintance to his rival, someone who the latter seemed to trust. Nagumo, by looking into Ayanukoji's background, was able to profile and get a semi-accurate assessment of Kiyotaka's abilities and allegiance to Manabu, working around the hypothesis of why the elder Horikita displays so much attention to someone with little to no social integration. Nagumo estimated the first year to be someone whose abilities are on par with the likes of Ryuuen and Sakiyanagi at the very least, and this made Nagumo worried that he may be one of the people that serves to Manabu Horikita's most important assets, which threatened his plan to set the stage to his objectives. Before the winter vacation ended, Nagumo introduced himself to Ayanokoji in an aggressive manner, such as harassing and provoking him in public to test his reactions and see for himself if Kiyotaka is someone who budges easily. This is important for him as he plans to make a thorough assessment of Ayanokoji and how much of a threat he is to him, at the same time as he striked against Manabu. The Mixed Training Camp, or MTC, had that objective. While the main course of Nagumo's strategy was to deceive and bankrupt Manabu Horikita, which he did successfully, the second objective was to see how much he can toy with Ayanokoji Kiyotaka and establish if he is someone he could potentially enjoy crushing. Nagumo involves schemes targeting Ayanokoji multiple times in his MTC strategy, these being the rock paper scissors draft, the old maid game, and the Ishikura fabrication. Using these, Nagumo is able to get a ground on Ayanokoji's group, test his observation and logical reasoning ability, assessing his connection to Manabu Horikita while simultaneously checking if Ayanokoji had seen through him. For these reasons, Kiyotaka himself had to pay extra attention to whatever he was doing in the Mixed Training Camp, even forming defense strategies while laying low, as he recognized the potential threat in Nagumo seeing all the traps and tests he had made. Kiyotaka had to go as far as to lie to Manabu Horikita about him seeing anything suspicious about Nagumo in the exam itself, which left the latter with not enough reasons to consider Nagumo's potential threat and essentially crippling his own ally, which Kiyotaka did primarily to navigate the exam and make Nagumo get the wrong conclusion about his intelligence and abilities. While Kiyotaka avoided Nagumo's detection initially, he was met with another problem in Year 1 Volume 9, during the time of the rumors about Ichinose being spread by his ally. Ayanokoji was informed that Miyabi Nagumo made contact with Kushida, a traitor in his class looking to expel him. This made Kiyotaka act up and formulate a strategy which targeted a multitude of objectives at the same time, but primarily making Kushida a lesser threat by destroying her new alliance with the council president while placing a death flag on her. Before Nagumo had any chance to capitalize on his new pawn from first year Class D, he was made to believe that Kushida Kikyo betrayed him by giving out secrets to someone who used them deliberately to create rumors in the first year, and in turn get away to save Ichinose Hanami from her predicament, something which Nagumo was looking to capitalize on. Nagumo connected the dots on Ayanokoji being Ichinose's savior and the mastermind behind all the events. He even additionally attributed that his scheme required the use of Kiriyama Ikito's council influence and Kushida's knowledge on the targeted people. However, it was all too late.
The next clash between them happened indirectly again, during the class ball events where Nagumo was looking to capitalize on Ichinose Hanami's desperation to save all of her classmates by extending her lifetime in private points at the cost of dating him. Nagumo opportunistically aimed to get close to Ichinose while appearing a hero to her class, in turn gaining control of her indirectly. Upon hearing of it, Kiyotaka schemed his way and offered Ichinose an alternate way to get her shortage of points, which cut Nagumo's deal off. At the end of the first year, Nagumo was able to launch the final stage and battle of survival of Manabu Horikita, achieving his goal and establishing a proper end to the conflict with his senior. This briefly left him without the competition he wanted to have. Instead, feeling like he had already achieved everything advanced during high school has to offer, as he gained total control of his year and became president. In what's now the second year, there was Kiyotaka Ayanokoji, who Nagumo was very intrigued by, considering he was not able to gauge him properly, obsessed with aiming to destroy Manabu Horikita by destroying his true successor. Miyabi begins to prepare to establish a proper competition with Kiyotaka, promising to crush him thoroughly. Nagumo found himself dominating in the second island exam, securing his desired position while holding back throughout it. More so, his contingencies against Kiyotaka had proven effective, as Nagumo was able to anticipate his strategy to ramp up points after staying near the top 10 for a large duration of the exam, and he even had the possibility to crush that strategy had Kiyotaka ever decided to risk trying it. After his assessment, Nagumo met with Kiyotaka on the final day of the island to confront him, challenging him to a battle of superiority as Kiyotaka was intercepted midway to I-2 in a rush. Ayanokoji, who had to rush to I-2 as fast as possible, attempted for the quickest solution to get Nagumo, who didn't budge out of his way, which was to use his aura and violence to intimidate him. Ayanokoji pushed the president down and tried to instill fear into him, who firmly stood up as soon as possible, aggressively refusing to cower before Ayanokoji's murdering intent. As this was not effective, Ayanokoji then knocked Nagumo out of his way, concerning him with not getting involved into the situation with Tsukisho as it could potentially spill over into something worse. Due to this development, as Nagumo remained unmoved for a period of 30 minutes or less, the 30-year communication network in Nagumo's strategy to deal with Koenji broke down and could not roadblock Koenji as they effortlessly did before during Nagumo's guidance. This meant they lost massive amounts of points as Nagumo's group came in second place. Nagumo himself, however, had no interest in winning the island exam as he conveyed to Ayanokoji during their confrontation. He even had contingencies in place to control any crisis the third year would face. He used the situation to get even more control out of the desperate third year, who was controlling and weaponizing them against Ayanokoji during the cruise ship. Kiyotaka found himself surrounded by third-year glares, ordered by Nagumo, who indirectly blamed Kiyotaka for their loss, which made Ayanokoji going to any public event impossible without attracting attention. This was all for the sake of pressuring Ayanokoji into compliance with the challenge, exhausting his options for a period of time and getting his life to be uncomfortable as possible. Additionally, he capitalized off learning of his meeting with Honami Ichinose on the island and Ayanokoji's hidden girlfriend, Kei, to harm Ichinose's relationship with him, informing her of what he is hiding from her at the time Ichinose was supposed to be getting a reply to a love confession. Doing so just to annoy and try to get into Ayanokoji's head as much as possible. Few months passed and a new chance for a competition came during the second sports festival. Despite Nagumo trying to get Ayanokoji to antagonize him or pressure him into compliance, the latter still managed to avoid him, which led to what was likely the final chance for them to compete in something waste-away. Realizing that it's futile, Nagumo quits his psychological warfare against Ayanokoji and moves on from their competition. Nagumo remains at the top but unchallenged, in what he considers to be boring and an unsatisfying predicament. During the culture festival, Kiyotaka is informed by Asahina Nazuna, a person close to Nagumo, of the latter's past and background, more so importantly about his undefeated status and countless victories. It is then when Kiyotaka fully realized Nagumo's true aims within his confrontations all along, and why he is so desperately looking for a true rivalry. The undefeated status of Nagumo is something which intrigues Kiyotaka, as he is in a similar, yet so much different situation than him. Ayanokoji had grown a sense of curiosity about a potential battle with Nagumo, being interested to see how a man reacts upon tasting defeat for the first time, so he himself can know what feelings to expect upon his wish finally being fulfilled. From that, Kiyotaka had to rile up Nagumo back to a position where he could be interested in a competition, and he did so by promising a battle under the premise of receiving a large amount of private points in case he wins in the competition. Under a collaboration during the culture festival, which involved Nagumo using his resources to help Kiyotaka localize specific students throughout the exam's run, such as Haruka and Kushida, and additionally assist him with exposing a student for his malicious actions on the island by making him put on act during the last council meeting before the exam. The following incident happened in the council room. Nagumo and Ayanokoji had cemented their will to compete against one another. During the next council president elections, Nagumo planned for a competition with Ayanokoji, involving them pick one of the two candidates, these being Ichinose and Suzune, and support them throughout a voting process, whoever's side winning being the winner of their competition. But this plan was cut short by Kiriyama's intervention, using Kiryu and Furuka as a means to make Ichinose Honami not follow through with their candidate position, as well as Honami herself confessing that she's planning to quit the student council during that time anyway. This left the two of them without any solid competition, having to delay it for later.
In the latest volume, Year 2 Volume 11, Nagumo and Kiyotaka meet again during an exam involving multiple years called the Interchange Camp, in which 20 selected members of the third year are tasked with handling a group of second years and first years, competing in various selected events for the sake of gathering the most wins. The exam involved a leadership competition between the third years and an ability competition for the other years, meaning that Nagumo and Ayanokoji do not get to face each other directly. This greatly disappointed Nagumo, who accepted the circumstances and opted to make a bet with Kiyotaka on him having to win at least 17 of the 20 events he'd have to compete in, something which the latter succeeded in doing, earning him the promised private points. Nagumo had tried to have a true competition with the individual he has come to respect, Kiyotaka Ayanokoji. However, just like in the past year with Manabu, He could not get a direct competition with his rival. Luck was simply not on his side, and he had to face the harsh truth that his own prowess can only remain questioned. Nagumo used the ending of the battle with Kiyotaka to reflect on his circumstances and abilities, and cope with his disappointing predicament. In the end, him and Kiyotaka exchanged their goodbye from one another during the exam ending, where Nagumo offers his friendship via an invitation to the university he is going to after his graduation from Advanced Nurturing High School. Perhaps what Kiyotaka got to experience from this unsatisfying ending of such a conflict was the other side of the coin, where he would see himself failing to disprove his absolute superiority and having himself accept a harsh truth and a predicament he wishes to avoid, just like Nagumo had to. It is a harsh outcome, but a realistic and possible one where acceptance would be the only thing he could resort to. This is where Ayanokoji Kiyotaka vs Miyabi Nagumo was led to be finished. Whether or not Kinugasa would change the seemingly finished matter of this battle remains to be unclear. For now, all we can hope is to potentially get a satisfying closure to this big conflict.